The frontier did not heal. It adapted. That was the only way to survive. In the weeks after the second monster wave, the Eisenwald territory began to feel different, not safer, but structured in a way it had never been before. Patrol routes were no longer improvised. Supply wagons moved under tighter schedules. Watchtowers were repaired with reinforced wood and iron bands instead of simple patchwork. And along the forest boundary, strange, restricted zones appeared. Knights did not speak about them openly. They only avoided them, because no one had received a clear order explaining what they were. Only one truth circulated quietly among those who had seen the aftermath of the forest incident. If something stepped there, it did not come back. Lucian did not attend the discussions in the main hall. He rarely did. Instead, he continued refining his systems in silence. Each improvement came from observation of failure. A misaligned trigger in one zone, delayed ignition in another, a patch of soil that absorbed mana too quickly, rendering a device inert. He did not celebrate successes. He only cataloged weaknesses. That was the difference between invention and survival engineering. One was creation, the other was responsibility. Cedric visited the workshop one evening without announcement. He did not knock. He simply opened the door and stepped inside, as if testing whether Lucian had finally become dangerous enough to justify interruption. Lucian was kneeling over a wooden frame covered in small crystal nodes. He did not look up. "You're late," he said calmly. Cedric glanced around the room. The space was no longer a discarded workshop. It had become something else. A controlled environment of testing debris, marked soil samples, and modified military components arranged with deliberate spacing. "The entire western forest line is becoming a maze," Cedric said finally. Lucian adjusted a crystal alignment without hesitation. "It is not a maze." "Then what is it?" "A delay network." Cedric frowned. "That sounds like the same thing." Lucian paused briefly. "It is not." The distinction was not emotional. It was technical. Cedric stepped closer, careful not to disturb anything. "Father wants a report, officially." Lucian finally looked up. "For what?" Cedric hesitated. "That's the problem," he said. "He doesn't know how to categorize what you've done." A silence followed. Lucian returned his attention to the device. "Then categorize it as survival probability increase." Cedric exhaled slowly. "That is not how nobles write reports." Lucian replied without looking at him. "Then nobles write incorrect reports." That earned a faint, tired look from Cedric. Not anger, resignation. The report was never written by Lucian, but it was written about him. By others. First came the patrol commanders, then the logistics officers, then visiting supply merchants who had witnessed the strange absence of monster activity along certain routes. And finally, the Baron's own advisors. The words varied, but the pattern was consistent. Unusual defensive success, unexplainable reduction in monster infiltration, high-risk zones becoming unexpectedly stable, and always the same detail. No direct engagement required. Baron Aldrich read the compiled reports in silence. The hall was empty except for him and Leonhardt. Rain tapped against the stained glass windows, muting the outside world into a dull rhythm. Leonhardt stood with his hands behind his back, expression controlled but sharp. "This is not conventional defense," he said. "No," Aldrich replied. "It's not even tactical warfare," Leonhardt continued. "It's environmental control." Aldrich turned a page slowly. "Do you think it is stable?" Leonhardt hesitated. "That depends on whether you consider explosions under your own territory stable." Aldrich did not respond immediately. Instead, he set the report down. "The frontier does not survive through stability," he said quietly. "It survives through results." A pause. Then he added, "And it is surviving better than it has in years." Outside, Lucian remained unaware of the political weight forming around his work. For him, the system was still incomplete. He had identified a new problem. Monster behavior was evolving faster than expected. Some patrol reports suggested creatures were now avoiding certain forest paths entirely. Not out of fear, out of rerouting. That meant adaptation, which meant observation, which meant intelligence. Lucian stared at a crude map pinned to the workshop wall. Dots marked explosion points. Lines marked patrol routes. Empty spaces marked avoidance zones. He traced them silently with his finger. "They are learning the layout," he murmured. That was not acceptable. A system that could be learned was a system that could be bypassed. He began redesigning immediately. The summons came 2 days later. A formal request from the main estate hall. Lucian was not told why. only that he was required to attend. He arrived in plain clothing, hands still faintly stained with soil and manner residue. Knights outside the hall looked at him differently now, though none dared to speak openly. The change was subtle, respect mixed with uncertainty, as if they were unsure whether he was still a child, or something else entirely. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. Baron Aldrich stood at the far end. Cedric and Leonhardt were already present. Several advisors lined the sides of the room, holding documents and maps. Lucian stepped inside and stopped a few meters from the center. No one spoke immediately. Aldrich studied him for a long moment, not as a son, as a factor. Then he spoke. The territory has stabilized. Lucian said nothing. That stabilization is attributed to your systems. A slight pause before the word systems, as if the Baron was still deciding whether it belonged in a military vocabulary. Lucian nodded once. Yes. A murmur passed through the advisors. Aldrich continued. We cannot ignore what you have achieved. Lucian waited. And yet, the Baron added, we cannot classify it with an existing doctrine. That was expected. Lucian replied simply, then doctrine is insufficient. Silence tightened in the hall. Cedric glanced at him briefly. Leonhardt narrowed his eyes slightly. Aldrich exhaled through his nose. You will attend the Royal Military Academy, he said finally. That sentence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Lucian blinked once, not surprised. Confirming, Aldrich continued. You will be formally evaluated, trained, and integrated into national military structure. One of the advisors looked uncertain. Baron, is that wise for the third son? Aldrich's voice did not rise. It is necessary. He turned slightly toward Lucian. Your methods are effective, but they are isolated. If you remain here, they remain unchallenged, unrefined, and politically invisible. A pause. Then, the capital will test them. Lucian understood immediately. This was not only education, it was exposure. And exposure meant scrutiny. He nodded once. I understand. That evening, Cedric found him alone near the estate wall. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Wind moved quietly through the damaged outer fields. Cedric leaned against a stone pillar. You're going to the capital, he said. Yes. Cedric looked at him for a long moment, then spoke more quietly. People there won't care about your systems. Lucian replied without hesitation. They will adapt. Cedric gave a short laugh, but it carried no humor. That's not what I mean. A pause. Lucian turned slightly. Cedric pushed off the pillar. Out there, you're not the third son of Isenwold, he said. You're just a frontier noble they've never seen before. Lucian absorbed that, not emotionally, strategically. Cedric looked at him one last time. Just don't forget you're still human. Then he left. Lucian remained alone. The wind moved across the field, passing over invisible boundaries he had helped create. Somewhere in the distance, a patrol bell rang once, then stopped. He looked toward the forest, then toward the road leading away from the territory. Both paths existed now, one inwards, one outwards, and for the first time since his reincarnation, Lucian realized something simple. His experiments were no longer confined to a frontier. They were about to be tested by an entire world.